I'm telling you this not to make you feel guilty, but to help you face a truth everyone's been avoiding. Your life does not reflect your dreams. It reflects the system you live in every single day. And if you don't have a system, or worse, you're living inside an unconscious one, then it doesn't matter how much inspiration you have, how many goals you write down, or how strong your willpower is, you will keep repeating yourself. Don't blame motivation. Motivation is just fuel. The system is the engine. You don't need another midnight motivational video, another brand new planner, or another hopeful Monday morning. You need a system that is simple, clear, and strong enough to operate even when you're tired, discouraged, lost, or doubting yourself. Because if you only take action when you feel ready, you'll never be ready. Successful people don't win because they feel more. They win because they've built a better system. They stopped waiting for inspiration. They created a structure that doesn't require inspiration to function. I've seen many smart people fail. They weren't lacking talent. They were lacking architecture. They were still giving their best every day, still working hard, but not producing any meaningful accumulation. Why? Because each of their actions was an isolated effort, not part of a functioning chain. They lived off emotional sparks, but expected long-term results. That contradiction is what traps them in mediocrity. Let's be honest. Do you really know what you're building, or are you just trying to do more without direction? A system is what answers that question. It's not an app, not a wall calendar. A system is how you organize your energy, your space, your time, your attention, so that results happen consistently. No emotion required, no force, no struggle. I built entire companies while sleeping on a couch, not because I was more passionate than anyone else, but because I had a system. I knew what needed to be done first, what could be automated, and what had to be eliminated. Every move I made fit within a structure. It wasn't random. I never woke up and asked myself, do I feel like working today? I knew exactly what I'd do, why I'd do it, and how it connected to the bigger picture. That's real freedom, not doing whatever you feel like, but knowing what truly moves you toward where you want to go. You can still fail with motivation, but you can't fail with the right system. Because the right system works even when you're weak. It makes good behavior your default, it reduces friction, it builds momentum, and while others are still struggling each day to try harder, you just keep the machine running. You don't need more goals. You need a structure that makes those goals happen automatically. You don't need more promises to yourself. You need an environment where the right action becomes easier than the wrong one. You don't need to become someone more disciplined. You just need a system that removes the need for discipline most days. That's how you redesign your entire life. I'm telling you this because I've seen too many talented people drown in scattered choices in the chaos of aimless mornings, in tasks that seem important but lead nowhere. They don't lack time, they lack a system. And if you don't sit down and design your life the way an architect designs a building, then you're living inside someone else's blueprint. I'm not here to preach. I'm here to tell you the truth. If you don't control your system, it will control you. And you'll wake up 10 years from now, not in the place you dreamed of, but in the place your default system led you to. Now is the time to stop and ask yourself, are the actions you take each day part of a smart, clear, effective sequence, or are they just scattered efforts patched together by hope? I don't want you to live like someone who runs endlessly but never arrives. I want you to live like someone who builds the track, so the train of your life doesn't need to be pushed, it moves on its own. Start here. Don't try to do more, start building a system, and then let that system take you where you never thought was possible. I'm telling you this not to pressure you, but to wake you up. If you want to build a different future, you can't start by chasing results. You have to start from within, where every real system is formed. Everything you're trying to achieve on the outside, money, influence, freedom, will always slip through your fingers if your inner world is still chaotic, unclear, and filled with self-doubt. You can't build a skyscraper on a rotten foundation. And you can't build a solid future if the system within you, the one that governs your behavior, habits, and decisions, is malfunctioning. I've met so many people who say they want to change, they write goals, they make plans, they read books, listen to podcasts, take notes on everything, yet somehow they always end up right back where they were last year. Why? Because they're trying to change behavior without changing the core architecture, their belief system, mental frameworks, and personal view of themselves. You can't live a new life with the same old self. If you still believe you're not good enough, not disciplined, not like successful people, you will always act according to that belief, even if on the surface you try to behave otherwise. The system you live in, the system you've assigned yourself, will drag you back to default. I've said it before, no one loses because they lack information. They lose because they're using the wrong self to try and create the right life. Every behavior you repeat comes from something deeper, your definition of who you are. If you believe you're always procrastinating, you'll act like a procrastinator. If you believe you're not capable of creating change, then every system you build will be quietly infected with doubt. And you won't give up because the system is wrong. You'll give up because you don't believe you're worthy of the right system. So before you change any tool, I want you to change the questions you're asking. Don't ask, what should I do every morning? Ask, who do I want to become? Don't ask, how do I exercise more consistently? Ask, what does a healthy person think that I don't? Don't try to bolt new habits onto an old identity. Reprogram the operating system before you install new apps. You want to redesign your future? Then start by redesigning you. Not by forcing yourself to become someone else, but by clearly defining your best version, then building a system that allows you to live as that version. When you change how you see yourself, how you spend your time changes. When you change your mental framework, every habit you once failed to sustain will finally have space to thrive. Not because you became better, but because you're now aligned with the structure you've built from within. I used to think that if I just worked hard enough, everything would fall into place. But I was wrong. I worked like crazy, but I had no architecture. And then I realized it's not that you lack effort. It's that you're using the wrong version of you. You're letting a version that is unclear, insecure, and full of doubt run the system. That's why every good behavior eventually fades. That's why you start every week full of expectations and end it feeling disappointed. The solution is not motivation, it's not another 7-step plan. The solution is redefining who you are and then building every habit, every block of time, every action around that version. That is the foundation. That is where the system truly begins to work. Think of it like this. If you were an architect, you would never build a house without a blueprint. So why are you living without a blueprint for yourself? Don't let the world decide who you are. Don't live according to the default system society handed you. Define yourself, then build every part of your life around that definition. Because if you don't intentionally build yourself like a system, you will live like a chain of reactions. And every reaction will pull you further away from your direction. But if you start from within, if you correct the operating system first, then every external action will fall into place automatically. And suddenly the future is no longer something you chase, it becomes a byproduct. I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm just asking you not to try to be someone else. Choose to be yourself, the version built with the right system, the right beliefs, and a strong internal structure. The architecture of your future doesn't begin with your work, it begins with you. I'm not telling you this to repeat cliches about time management. I'm saying this because most people don't actually lack time the way they often complain. They're just living inside a loose, leaky, and aimless time design. They think the problem lies in the number of hours in the day, but in reality the problem lies in how they're using each minute, and more deeply, in how they've designed their time system. I see you have a work schedule. I know you've tried using reminder apps, to-do lists, splitting your day into 12-6 blocks, but let me ask you this honestly. How much of that was designed based on you and not copied from someone else? How much of it truly reflects your rhythm, your energy, your strengths, and your personal goals? And how many hours in your day are actually spent in deep work instead of just reacting to messages, emails, or the urgent tasks others throw at you? You can't control results if you don't redesign your timeline. Don't say you're disciplined if your schedule is filled with distractions. You don't need to do more, you need to do less. but with more depth, more precision, and more intention. 1 hour of deep work is more valuable than 10 hours of scrambling. And that doesn't come from motivation, it comes from design. I used to live a 100-hour workweek rhythm, not to seem extreme, but because I knew where every hour belonged. I protected every blank space like it was an asset. Each time block was used as leverage, not as a routine. You're not losing time because you lack determination. You're losing time because you've let everything invade your timeline without control. You don't need to run faster. You need to clear your schedule. You need to rebuild your time blocks like an architect laying the foundation for a structure that cannot collapse. Because time, if not designed, will be stolen by everything that doesn't matter. And it's those meaningless things that will prevent you from achieving what matters most. I used to believe I had to do a lot to make every second count. But eventually I realized the value isn't in how much time you have, it's in the quality of it. And quality comes from structure. You have to protect your deep time blocks, the ones where you think, strategize, and solve hard problems, like they're your most precious assets. Because those are the hours where breakthrough value is created, not in emails, not in meetings, not in endless task lists. I want you to look directly at your calendar and ask, what does my time reflect? What is it serving, and what is it killing? If you don't have blank blocks of time to think, you'll live on someone else's schedule. If you don't have set hours for deep work, you'll spend your whole day doing shallow work. And if you don't know what you're spending time on, then your life is drifting toward randomness. Don't try to manage time in the old-fashioned way. Redesign it like a creator. Put priorities first. Build your schedule around your peak energy zones. Eliminate tasks that keep you busy but don't move you forward. Design your timeline like a bloodstream. It must flow in the right direction at the right pace toward the right goal. Every minute you protect is a minute you invest in your future. And I'm telling you this not as someone who has everything figured out. I'm telling you this as someone who once lost control of time and then learned how to take it back. I've lived through the days where everything felt urgent, where everyone wanted a piece of me, and I kept running but got nowhere. But the moment I paused and asked myself, what kind of time system am I living in, everything began to change. Not by adding more time, but by redesigning how I use each piece of it. You can't control everything in life, but you can control the structure of your time. And if you control that, you control your pace, your emotions, your energy, and your results. Redesigning your time isn't a productivity hack. It's the decisive act that determines whether you live as the driver or just as someone swept away by the current. Starting today, stop scheduling based on how you feel. Stop scheduling like someone building the future. And then you'll realize you don't need more time. You just need to design it right. I'm not telling you this to scare you, but to help you see clearly a mechanism that is shaping your entire life. And that is this. What you allow to enter your inner world is exactly what silently determines all your external results. Not circumstances, not the environment, not even your ability. It's the input. Input is the raw material your internal system processes to create output. And if you don't control it, you'll be controlled by it without even realizing. You think you're making your own choices, but the truth is your behavior is the final result of a chain of inputs. The information you read, the images you see, the sounds you hear, the stories you absorb, the people you surround yourself with, all of these are raw materials. If you feed your system with clutter, negativity, and shallow content, then don't expect it to produce clarity, efficiency, or consistency. The system can only process what you give it, and most people don't fail because they're not trying. They fail because they're feeding themselves things that cancel out their effort. I'm not saying you have to disconnect from the world. I'm saying you need a filter. You can't live letting just anyone have access to your perception. You can't start your day with negative news and expect to be creative in the afternoon. You can't hang around people who complain and procrastinate and expect to stay disciplined. You can't consume junk content online and still expect your mind to remain focused and deep. No system is strong enough to handle toxic input and still deliver high-quality output. Now, some people will say I'm mindful enough to filter what I take in, I'm not easily influenced. But let me be blunt with you, no one is immune to their environment. No one is immune to input. Your mind is not a flawless machine. It's a system that learns through repetition. Everything you see, hear, and come into contact with, whether you're conscious of it or not, leaves an imprint on your internal operating system. And those imprints eventually shape your direction, your habits, your behavior, and ultimately your results. I'm not asking you to live in isolation. I'm asking you to live selectively. You must know how to set up boundaries for your input. Just as a business owner controls their supply chain to ensure a high-quality final product, you must control the spiritual supply chain of your own life. That means you must choose carefully what you allow into your eyes, your ears, your mind each day. Choose your friends. Choose your sources of information. Choose your content. Choose whose advice you listen to, not because you're arrogant, but because you have a clear goal. And a clear goal demands high-quality input. I used to let my mind stay wide open to everything. I thought I was being flexible, open-minded, informed, but then I realized it was that very looseness with input that cost me my inner clarity. I got pulled into the noise, into external standards, into expectations that were never mine to begin with, and I ended up living reactively instead of by design. I acted based on emotion instead of a system. And it all started from one seemingly small thing. I didn't control what I was consuming every day. I'm telling you this as a gentle but firm warning. Guard the gates of your inner life as if you were protecting the survival of a critical system, because that's exactly what you're doing. Your internal system needs nourishment, and that nourishment doesn't come from fleeting inspiration, but from carefully selected, consistently filtered input. You don't need to be extreme, you just need to be conscious. Every morning, before you turn on your phone, ask yourself, what is the first thing I'm letting into my mind today? Every time you scroll online, ask, is this content nourishing me or draining me? Every relationship, every conversation, ask, after this interaction, do I feel clearer or more confused? When you start asking those questions, you'll find your internal system begins to operate more accurately, more efficiently. Not because you're trying harder, but because you've stopped poisoning it with the wrong input. I'm not here to tell you to avoid the world. I'm here to remind you, you are building a living system, and that system can only be as good as the material it's built from. Because, in the end, you don't become what you dream of. You become what you consume daily without realizing. Control the input. That is the real lever for every lasting change. I'm not telling you this to help you get more done, but to help you escape the trap of endless repetition. You're wasting something incredibly valuable that you may not have realized. Every time you do something from scratch, without an accompanying system, you're burning time, burning energy, burning brain power on an action that leaves behind no accumulated value. I don't care how hard you're working. If every day you're starting from zero, solving the same problems, making the same decisions over and over again, then you're not living effectively. You're just living exhaustingly. A system is not something that makes life dry or rigid. On the contrary, a system is what frees you from manual labor. It's how you build a structure smart enough to keep producing results without needing you to start over every day. When you begin to think in systems, you'll notice something fascinating. Every action you take today, if designed properly, can generate returns later. One piece of writing used many times. One decision applied to hundreds of situations, one setup, and you benefit every single day. I'm not saying you have to become an automation engineer. I'm saying you need to think like a flow designer. For example, if you often feel stressed in the mornings because you don't know where to start, ask yourself, can you create a default morning checklist? If you're spending too much time answering the same kind of questions from customers, colleagues, or staff, why not prepare a ready-made guide to handle it for you? If you constantly have to convince yourself to get to work, why not design a workspace that's attractive enough so you no longer have to push yourself? Each of these solutions only needs to be built once, and they can save you hundreds of hours later. I used to think that if I could do things fast enough, I didn't need a system. But I was wrong, because the more skilled you are, the more you can do, and that's exactly what makes you easier to trap. Talented people often become victims of their own capability. They don't build systems because they can handle it themselves. But then they drown in tasks, get pulled into reactive cycles, and can't scale. Being good won't save you from being overwhelmed. Only systems can do that. A system is your silent partner. It doesn't sleep. It doesn't complain. It doesn't need motivation. But if you build it right, it works for you every single day. It helps you maintain rhythm. It gives you leverage. It expands your impact without doubling your effort. And most importantly, it preserves your mental clarity because you're no longer stuck repeating unnecessary things. I want you to pause for a moment and ask yourself, how many tasks are you repeating every day, every week, every month that you could have just designed once? How many decisions have you made for the 50th time that you could have standardized into a principle? How many problems have you encountered over and over again without ever sitting down to build a process so it never returns? When you live by a system, you're not just solving today's problem, you're sending a gift to your future self 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 3 years from now. I'm not saying you have to build something grand. Sometimes a simple automated email command, a standard reply template, a fixed block of time for creative work, a decision-making formula, or a basic tracking sheet is enough to create massive change. Because the essence of a system is not in its complexity, it lies in its consistency and its ability to yield returns over time. A simple system applied consistently will always outperform a complex system that gets forgotten. I've witnessed people change their entire lives just because they decided to build the right thing. They no longer wake up in chaos. They no longer work with a scrambled head. They no longer race against deadlines. They didn't become perfect, but they became free from the trivial, free from the guilt of not doing enough, free from having to start over every day. I want you to have that freedom too. And it doesn't come from trying harder. It comes from pausing, reflecting, and asking, what can I build once so that it works for me every day? When you begin to live with that question, you won't just live more effectively, you'll start living more strategically. And from there, results are no longer something you chase. They become something that happens naturally as the inevitable outcome of a system you consciously built. I'm not telling you this to diminish the value of money, but to help you stop placing it in the wrong position in your life. Wealth is not the destination, it's the result. If you still see money as the goal, you'll forever be chasing it. But if you see money as the outcome of a correct system, a system that creates value, manages resources well, maintains discipline, and raises standards every single day, then money will find its way to you. The issue isn't how much money you want, the issue is whether you've built a strong enough system to generate it sustainably. I've met many people who live in inner conflict between the desire to become wealthy and guilt about having money. They think wealth is a selfish goal, or conversely, they believe that simply working hard will eventually lead to wealth. Both of those beliefs are flawed, because wealth isn't just about making a lot of money. It's about the ability to create recurring value, to retain what's important, to reinvest wisely, and to continuously optimize your living system so that your time, energy, and resources flow in the right direction. If you look closely, truly wealthy people don't live like money chasers, they live like system thinkers. They don't make decisions based on emotion, but based on structure. They don't react to the market, they proactively design the rules of the game, and most importantly, they don't try to spend less than others, they just spend more intentionally. Because to them, money is not a tool to show off status, it's the lifeblood that sustains the value system they're operating. I want you to stop thinking about money as something you have to chase. Instead, start designing a system that has the ability to generate it. That means you need to know where your strengths lie. Focus on creating value from those strengths, build products, services, or solutions that others actually need, then wrap that into an operational system that can scale and repeat. Without a system, every effort you make to become wealthy will rely on inspiration, luck, or circumstances. And that's not sustainable. You can win once without a system, but you can't win consistently unless there's a clear architecture behind you. You might earn money from a one-time deal, but you won't be able to keep that money and certainly won't grow it if your financial system is still driven by emotions, old habits, or limiting beliefs about scarcity. I've lived through times when I had money but still felt anxious because back then I didn't have a system to protect and grow my finances. Every spending decision felt like a gamble. Every time my income increased, I'd wonder, Will it be like this next month? Only when I rebuilt my entire financial system, from spending habits to investment strategy, expense structure, and even my mindset around money, did I finally feel free. Not because I had more, but because I had better control. Wealth is not about how much you have in your bank account. Wealth is when you're no longer controlled by the fear of not having enough. It's when you have the power to say no to the wrong jobs, the freedom to invest long-term, and the discipline to resist short-term temptations. And all of that doesn't come from trying to get rich. It comes from building the right system. A system that runs even while you rest. A system that generates income even if you don't show up every day. A system that keeps you from spiraling into crisis over a single setback. I'm not encouraging you to live for money, but I do want you to live smart enough to not be ruled by it. And the only way to do that is to put money in its proper place, not as the goal, but as the result. Not something you hope for, but the natural outcome of a system you consciously designed. When you do the work you're good at, solve real problems that people face, manage your resources intentionally, and optimize every link in your life system, money stops being something to worry about. It becomes something that shows up on its own. You don't need to obsessively crave wealth. You just need to build the right system, and then wealth will be something you can't avoid. Not because you wished for it, but because you designed it. I don't care how well built your system is, how clear your goals are, or how disciplined you think you are. If you place all of that inside a misaligned environment, one that lacks support and is full of noise, it will eventually crack, erode, and collapse. And you'll be left wondering why you're doing all the right things but making no progress. That's because you forgot one critical truth. A system doesn't exist in a vacuum. It lives, breathes, and operates within a specific environment. And if you don't control that environment, it will end up controlling you. I want you to stop and think carefully. The environment you're living in, not just the physical place, but also the mental space, energy, relationships, and information. Is it supporting or sabotaging the system you're trying to build? You may wake up with the intention to write, learn, but if your surroundings are filled with noise, with people who complain, with negative news, and constant distractions, then within a few hours, that intention will be so eroded that you'll start believing you're just lazy or unmotivated. Let me be clear, no one is strong enough to maintain high productivity, deep inspiration, and consistent discipline inside a toxic environment. No one. Because the environment doesn't just affect your behavior, it reprograms your perception. It alters the language you use. It reshapes how you see yourself. It quietly lowers your standards. Starting with the smallest things. If you're surrounded by 5 people who procrastinate, you'll begin to think delay is normal. If your space is cluttered, you'll subconsciously allow chaos into your mind. If you live around people who say, don't try too hard, you'll begin to shrink your dreams without realizing it. I'm not saying you have to leave everyone behind, but you must create a safe zone, somewhere your system can be protected. That could be a clean workspace where you don't bring your phone. That could be a small group of like-minded people who keep you anchored to your purpose. That could be a curated list of content channels that recharge you with the right energy. The environment doesn't have to be big, but it must be right, and it must be nourishing. I once lived in an environment where every system I tried to build collapsed quickly, not because I was lazy, but because I was constantly pulled back to a lower standard. I woke up with a clear plan, but got drawn into pointless conversations. I set time blocks for deep work, but my surroundings were too chaotic to focus. I wanted to grow, but everyone I interacted with was stuck in survival mode and didn't believe in change. Eventually, I realized it wasn't that my system was wrong. I had simply planted it in infertile soil. I'm telling you this because I don't want you blaming yourself when what's actually killing your hard-built system is a destructive environment. You have to be brave enough to ask, what's draining my energy every day? Who is making me doubt my own potential? What space is stealing my clarity? And how many external forces have you allowed to invade your inner world when that is the very space you should protect most? Every strong system needs an environment that supports it. A world-class athlete cannot train in a noisy, chaotic street. A composer cannot create if there's no silence for emotion to rise. A founder cannot make sharp decisions if surrounded by people who only say, "Don't dream too big." So if you're serious about the life you want to build, you must be serious about the environment you're building it in. You won't always be able to choose the perfect environment, but you can always create micro-environments, small zones you fully control, a morning routine without social media, a limited list of people you truly want to engage with each day, a playlist that helps you focus, a drawer that contains only tools for creativity. That's how you create system oases, spaces where everything runs by your rules, not someone else's. I want you to look at your environment as if you were its architect, not its victim. Start adjusting the small things, the details that seem insignificant, because it's exactly those little things, noise, light, words, energy, that are rewriting the way you live each day. And if you don't write the script for your environment, don't be surprised when the environment starts rewriting your life. I'm telling you this as someone who has repeatedly destroyed himself by rushing. Don't try to leap. Don't think you'll go from chaos to perfection overnight. Real progress never comes in a burst. It comes from structured accumulation. You don't need to change your whole life in a week. You just need to change one layer and build from there. Because a sustainable system isn't built on short-term motivation. It's built on a solid first layer so that every layer after that can stand without collapsing. I've seen too many people start the week on fire and burn out by Wednesday. They write grand plans, set ideal goals, declare that they'll start fresh, but forget the core truth. No one can live according to the plan they've drawn if they don't yet have the foundation to support it. You can't build a fifth floor if the first floor isn't stable. You can't do 6 hours of deep work a day if you haven't even secured the first 60 distraction-free minutes of your morning. You can't sustain 30 days of discipline if the first 3 days are a struggle just to stay awake. Every real system must grow in layers, step by step, level by level, standard by standard. The problem isn't that you lack determination. The problem is that you've chosen a height that doesn't match your foundation. When you keep trying to climb fast without knowing what you're standing on, you'll collapse. Not because you're not capable, but because you ignore the laws of construction. And when you fall, you start questioning yourself. Why can't I stick with it? Why do I lose motivation halfway? But it's not your fault. It's the model's fault. And the right model always gives you a realistic starting point so you can build without losing momentum. I want you to look at your life system like a building. Each floor is a habit, a decision, a principle, a supportive tool. And no floor should be built if the one below is still unstable. If you're still not getting enough sleep, not eating properly, not managing your inputs, then don't rush into peak performance or total life optimization. Go back to the lowest level, where the system begins with stability, and that is the true root of all progress. I used to think that to change my life, I needed to do something big. But the only thing that truly changed me was when I started doing small things systematically. I rewrote my mornings, starting with just the first 2 hours of each day. I created fixed time blocks for deep work. I rewrote my decision-making process so I wouldn't waste mental energy on repeated problems. I didn't try to do everything. I just focused on solidifying each layer and letting each layer serve the next. Leaping sounds appealing, but it rarely lasts because you can't build a new version of yourself if the root inside you is still in disorder, and everything you haven't faced will come back to block you right when you think you're ready for a breakthrough. That's why so many people keep getting pulled back to the starting line, not because they didn't try, but because they didn't build. They only jumped. And you can't leap far when the ground beneath you is sinking sand. I want you to remember this. Building the first layer may not look glamorous, but it will save you from unnecessary collapse. Don't rush to double your work hours if you haven't doubled your clarity. Don't rush to learn new skills if you haven't optimized your old habits. Don't rush to set higher goals if you haven't turned your current goals into repeatable systems. Because no high floor will stand if the base isn't deep enough. You don't need to rush to succeed. You just need a layered system where every part is checked, reinforced, and designed to support the next. That's not slowness. That's strategy. And if you truly want to go far, choose to rise from the lowest floor, slowly, steadily, intentionally, then you'll see you don't need to leap. When you build it right, the system lifts you on its own. I'm telling you this as a necessary reminder. No matter how well you build your system, there will come a time when it breaks. One day you'll skip a habit you've kept for 3 months. Sooner or later, your environment will shift, your resources will change, people will change, and what once worked smoothly will begin to glitch. But the moment your system breaks is not proof you've failed. It's an opportunity to look deeper into the old structure and ask a crucial question: is it time to upgrade? Don't obsess over maintaining perfection. A system doesn't need to be invincible. It needs to be resilient. You don't need to live without mistakes. You need the ability to identify where the breakdown happened, why it happened, and how to rebuild a stronger version of the system. Because every time the system breaks, it's revealing a hidden weakness, something you might never have noticed without the disruption. I once built a very rigid work system. Fixed hours, detailed task lists, a clear creative routine. Everything worked perfectly, until I encountered a family crisis. My working hours were thrown off, I was no longer in my familiar space, and my schedule had to change. Within a few days, it felt like the entire system collapsed. But instead of breaking down, I sat down and wrote a new version, one that was more flexible, softer, and more realistic. I didn't force myself to hold on to the old version. I chose to upgrade. And I lost it. I want you to understand this. A system is not a prison, it's a foundation. And sometimes that foundation needs to be broken down to be rebuilt taller, stronger, more fitting. Don't confuse maintaining discipline with clinging to an outdated version. Life changes, you change, goals change. And if your system doesn't change with them, it becomes a burden, not because you're not strong enough, but because you're trying to apply an old tool to a new context. I've seen many people spiral into guilt when they take a day off, lose momentum, or miss a weekly goal. But those breaks are signals, moments calling you to reassess the system. Maybe the habit you chose is no longer relevant. Maybe the time block you set isn't feasible anymore. Maybe you're forcing yourself instead of letting the system serve you. And if you're clear-headed enough, you'll realize this is the time to restructure. You need to train a reflex. When a system breaks, don't blame yourself. Question the structure. When you lose motivation, don't doubt the value of the goal. Check your approach. When you procrastinate, don't label yourself as lazy. Review whether your environment, habits, or daily cycle are draining you more than fueling you. A good system is not one that never fails. It's one that can self-regenerate and continuously improve. Every time you upgrade your system, you move closer to a version of life that's not just effective, but also intelligent, adaptive, and sustainable. You don't need a permanent structure. You need a structure that evolves with you. I want you to start loving your off-track moments, because that's where you learn the most. That's where you pause and examine each link in the chain. That's where you gain clarity on what truly creates results and what only gives the illusion of progress. And if you're brave enough to revise, not just patch, but truly upgrade, then every time the system breaks becomes a leap forward in your overall journey. Don't be afraid to change the structure. The worst thing is holding on to a system that's no longer working just because you spent effort building it. Remember, the system is a tool, not your identity. You are not bound to any version. Every time you feel off, ask yourself, do I need to push harder or do I need to rebuild? The right answer won't leave you exhausted. It will leave you relieved. Can you realize living by a system doesn't mean living rigidly. It means living with a foundation so you can be flexible when needed, bounce back when broken, and keep moving forward, not with brute force, but with the power of an increasingly refined system. That is true intentional living, and that is how you endure, no matter what changes around you. I'm not talking to you about a vague or distant future. I'm talking about a life structure silently being built from what you're doing today. Every choice you make, every behavior you repeat, every habit you maintain is a brick in the system of life you'll be living in tomorrow. The future isn't something waiting for you ahead. It's something you're silently designing, hour by hour, minute by minute, through things that seem trivial and ordinary. I need you to understand this clearly. You don't step into the future, you build it. If your present feels exhausting, chaotic, and out of control, that's not fate. It's the result of a system you've let operate too long without redesigning it. And if you want a different future, don't wait for circumstances to change. Don't hope for a motivated day. Start by changing the system, because motivation is fragile, but structure is lasting. When you have the right life system, you don't need to force motivation. The system itself pulls you forward. I used to think the future was something that happened to me, but then I realized the people around me had different futures, not because they were luckier, but because they had different life systems. Someone who does deep work every morning will never be the same as someone who scrolls their phone for 2 hours before getting out of bed. Someone who eats well, sleeps enough, and controls their inputs will make completely different decisions than someone whose routine is broken, energy depleted, and mindset ruled by emotion. And after a few years, the gap between the two isn't a few steps, it's 2 entirely different planets. You can't hope for a peaceful future if your life system is full of chaos. You can't expect to wake up confident, strong, and clear-headed if you're still repeating the same old cycles, negative emotions, and careless decisions. The future doesn't need you to dream of it. It needs you to build it, layer by layer, structure by structure, link by link. And trust me, you don't need to change the whole world. You just need to change the system that controls how you live each day. I'm not telling you to be perfect. I'm not saying everything will go smoothly. But I promise you this, if you start living as the architect of your life instead of the victim of your circumstances, in just a few months, you'll begin to see the first signs of a different future. A future that didn't come from luck or miracles, but from a system you laid the foundation for yourself. Stop living off short bursts of inspiration. Stop overexerting yourself one day and burning out for the next 6. Stop chasing new methods without first building a stable structure. All you need is a simple life system, repeatable, controllable, and tailored to you, so that every tomorrow begins from a stronger base than today. You don't need to wait for the perfect moment to start building your system, because there's no moment better than today. There's no energy stronger than a conscious decision. And there's no gift more powerful than the moment you say, I will live as someone who is building the future, not just dreaming about it. And once you live that way, every small action becomes meaningful, every new habit becomes a foundation. Every time you persist becomes an irreversible step forward. Understand this. The system you build today will save you from exhaustion a year from now. It will protect you from crises. It will help you stay grounded when everyone around you loses direction. It will help you make the right decisions when emotions are no longer a reliable compass. It will keep you standing, not because you're better than anyone else, but because you've designed your life with intention. I'm not advising you to live rigidly, I'm advising you to live with structure, with a system, with clear intent. Because it's the system, not motivation, not someone else's advice, that will stay with you for the long run, carry you through every season of change, and take you to a place you can truly call your future self. Stronger, wiser, free. The future isn't far away, it's just the multiplied result of the life system you choose to build today. And if you're brave enough to live like a builder, I promise you, you won't just change your life, you'll redesign the entire way you experience the world. And you'll never again feel like a victim of circumstances. You are the architect. And the future is the structure waiting for you to finish.